you know, pastures don't really talk, but then again, maybe they do, you know, and at first I thought, well, you know, they give us visual messages more than anything else. And after a while I got to thinking, well, you know, we can hear a lot more than you might realize if we go out there and pasture. And it's what we hear and what we don't hear that count. And you know, we can hear our livestock out there and everything, but to me, one of the things when we start talking about the health of the ecosystem, we're still talking about ecosystems here. You know, when I go to the native pastures, there are some things I want to hear. In the spring, I want to hear the prairie chickens booming. I want to hear the upland sandpipers doing their mating call as those males fly up in the air. I want to hear the dickcissels. You know, dickcissels are little birds, parasites, but they're not as plentiful as they used to be. So there are a lot of things like that. I even kind of like to hear the rush of the fire when we burn those pastures when it's needed and stuff. So, and even the wind, you know, one of my concerns where I live, we have the invasion of trees, a lot of trees into our pastures if we're not careful. And the wind sounds differently going through trees than it does when you're in the grass. So, you know, there are a lot of actual messages that we can get from our ears, but there are a lot of visual messages that tells us how good a job we're doing as far as managing that native prairie, that native pasture out there, and maybe some things that we shouldn't be doing, some things that will tell us maybe we ought to change. So I'm gonna, but I originally hoped that we'd have this completely as a discussion, and I saw how many people were going to be here, and I just said, well, I better have a little something to show here. But I do invite questions, and you know, during and hopefully we'll have a little time afterwards. So let's go with that and see what we can find out about prairies. By the way, that rock is for real. It goes back a long ways, and Alex actually alluded to that. That's one of those rocks that came with the glaciers in the northern end of the Flint Hill. Well, and I did create a little handout, and I just put them on the table there in the middle there. If you want to follow along, feel free to grab one of those. But these are the kind of things that I think the pasture would tell us. First of all, I'm cheap and I'm not easy. Grazing is, grazable forages are the cheapest feed you can provide for your livestock. Way cheaper than harvested grains or things like that. Cheaper than hay, any of those kind of things. Anything you can graze is cheaper than what you're going to carry out there and feed to these. So I think that's kind of the first message that they would tell us. Well, coming from that, then, our goal should be, we want to graze year-round. Can we graze year-round? We may not be able to graze year-round, but we can get close. And these are some of my cows, and you know, this was like January, and sure enough, they're out there on dry grass. Now, we may have to provide a little help to them, but they can still find their way. We do not have to carry all that feed to them year-round. I really, in my own system, and you'll see a lot of my own program here today, I feed very little hay, no more than necessary. My cows should be on dry grass at least until the middle of January and even beyond. And even once they get closer to calving in the spring, they're still going to be out on dry grass, and I may provide them a little more supplement depending on the weather and the conditions that they're in. But I think that's important to try to keep them grazing year-round. That will help keep our bottom line in the right perspective. You are what you eat. You've probably heard that expression. And so one of the things that I think is really, really interesting when we look at native rangelands and native pastures is that there are a tremendous diversity of things out there. And the folks ahead of me talked about diversity. But in our native prairies here, we're in the tall grass prairie region, but it also applies to the midgrass and the shortgrass farther west in Kansas. You know, there's 5 main grasses out there: big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass, and side oaks scramble. But there are a lot of other things to go along with that, including some cool season grasses, briar grasses, prairie June grass, the sedges that were mentioned, and things like that. A lot of broadleaf things and legumes, a lot of native legumes. We'll see some of those this afternoon. And all of those things are a part of the system. And if you get out there and really watch, and I think this is probably true for sheep and goats, I do have a little experience with some of those, but not like I do with cattle. They will eat some of a lot of things. I'll give you an example of that here. Recently, we were moving some calves down the road, my wife and granddaughter, and lo and behold, those calves on the roadside, they were eating a lot of a plant we call Ohio spiderwort. I'd never noticed that before, and then I got to thinking, you know, out in the pastures, you hardly ever see Ohio spiderwort out in the pasture. It's in the road ditches, the cattle grazing. So when you look and you drive down the road in a native prairie area, you will find that there are a number of plants that you don't see in the pasture, but you see them in the protected areas. And that tells you something about what's going on out there. And those cattle need something in their diet, or otherwise they wouldn't be eating those things. So I think it's interesting just to take the time to go and watch and find what they're eating and what they're not eating. I think it tells us that we need to do a really good job of being able to identify plants. And I would suggest to you that if you have an interest in native pastures at all, that if you are not already learning those plants, that you get you a book or two. And I've got a couple there in the back, and I can show them to you that I think are good. There's some websites. There are always things like Prairie Walks. The Kansas Native Plant Society has a number of wildflower tours each year, and those are a good way to learn some of those things. But a lot of times your neighbors or people like Alex and the other NRCS folks can help you with those kind of things. Those resources are out there. Native grass pastures, and that's mostly what we'll talk about. A lot of warm season grasses. Most of the grasses grow during the warm season. There are some others, diverse species. They are naturally adapted. One of the things about our native pastures, Alex said they get a lot of clay here. We got two types of soil in Greenwood County where I live. We got clay and rocks, and we got rocks and clay. That's what we don't have much else. But if you go through most of our native grass pastures anywhere in this region, you'll find that there are different soil types based on the geology that's there. And that kind of complicates the grazing pattern, because cattle prefer certain soil types or range sites, if you want to call them that or whatever, because the plants take up different minerals, they taste differently, different plants grow there. So that creates problems in terms of grazing patterns and grazing distribution. So, and different plants, they have different preferences for different plants. I can still remember my first class in range management. Dr. Panic said, big blue stem is the ice cream plant. I mean, they like big blue stem more than any other grasses. Now, that preference kind of changes some through the years, but overall, big blue stem is the one they like best. And so that's kind of a key species when we look at that. But we do, in our area, we do, especially from here east, we have some cool season pastures, brome and fescue. And I would say that in terms of grazing management, if you have cool season pastures, you should work toward incorporating some of those other types of plants, especially legumes. I mean, some clovers, there's some grazable alfalfas, some vetches and things like that. They put nitrogen in the soil, they help build that soil health, but they also help the diet of the cattle and help to offset some of the things that are missing in that diet. I'm going to stop there with that on the cool season pastures. Also then, in terms of available forages and to help the native grasses, some of these cover crops and other kinds of things, or even crop aftermath, corn stalks, even some of the wheat fields that you see now with all the rain we've had, there's a lot of so-called weeds growing up out there. Most of those plants are grazable at some time or another. I mean, it's interesting to me that one of the really palatable grasses is crabgrass. You think of crabgrass as a problem, and it can be in certain situations, but I used to live in a place rented a place that had about a 2-acre yard in it, and lived down at the end of a long lane, and I'd come home in the evening There was a lot of crabgrass in that yard along with some other things. But I'd let my cows out in there for about 30 minutes. I mean, they ate that stuff. It was feed. I mean, why not? And, you know, a lot of our wheat fields right now, rather than go out and burn it, unless you're going to plant another crop in behind it, if you're going to leave it set, wait for next year planting it. I mean, if you got some water for those cows, turn them out there. That's a forage. So, you know, look at different forage sources. Well, we're in KANZA. What does that mean? KANZA, of course, is an Indian word. The Kaw Indians thought of themselves as people of the south wind. How does that fit with managing native pastures? Cattle tend to graze into the wind. Invariably, unless there's some of these other factors that override, they will graze the south end of the pasture more than they will the north end. Okay? And especially if you got anything like a high hill on the south end, you find a day like we're going to have tomorrow, and they'll be up there on that high hill, you know, catching that wind, which not only cools them, but helps to keep those flies off. So yeah, we're in Kansas. What happens in the wintertime? That's a Sasnak day. So you can just turn the word Kansas around. That says Sasnak. Okay. Well, I threw this in there. This is one of my pastures, and we had a little grazing distribution problem one year, and that I don't even remember now what caused that. But I took that picture because that picture taken at the same time toward the end of the season, and you can see how much more the area on the left was grazed than that on the right. How do we get the cattle to graze through the whole pasture? Well, factors that influence in terms of grazing distribution, in addition to the range sites and the wind. Range sites is one of them, wind is another one. Water, where we put the salt and mineral. If we burn a part of the pasture, and Jane, you're familiar with that, you're using a program where you use that to manipulate distribution, fencing, all of those kind of things will influence grazing distribution. Well, in terms of being able to kind of harvest a whole pasture, then how do we do that? I mean, we can move the mineral around. We're not going to move the water sources around. We can use fire. And kind of go back to the question of fire that came up before. A lot of pastures here in the Flint Hills where they run yearling cattle, stocker cattle, are burned every year. I think that definitely has some soil health issues and some other things in terms of water runoff and water quality. I mean, if we burn big areas in April and our heaviest rainfalls come in May and June, what does that do to water quality? The other thing that happens, I think, is because there's so many areas that have to be burned in a short period of time, we probably burn with less than ideal conditions. And if you look closely at the recommendations for burning native pastures that come out of K-State, it will tell you that you need the soil moist and the bottom of the mulch layer moist, and so that when we burn, we leave some of that mulch layer there. We do not burn it right down to the mineral soil. I hear way too many guys say, we sure got a clean burn on that pasture. God, I hate that. We don't want that. We want to leave some of that mulch layer there to help cool the soil, to help hold that moisture, help feed those microorganisms. That's all part of it. How do we do that? I don't know, but I used to think burning was fun. I've come around to the conclusion that it's really hard work, and if I can't get just the right conditions when it comes time to burn, I won't burn it. I'll wait a year to burn it. And as an example of that, this year, early in April, the people around me that were building fence told me that they had to put water in the hole in order to get the dry dirt up out of there. I thought we were still in the drought. Are we still in the drought? You wouldn't believe it after last night or what we've had this spring. But my good friend David Kraft, who is our state rangeland specialist for NRCS, has told me that we're either always going into a drought or coming out of a drought. That is the nature of a grassland climate. Drought is a part of a native grass, a prairie climate. It is going to be there sometime. Okay. Many happy returns. You've heard that expression. Well, okay, one of the things about the native grasslands is that they are resilient. They're very resilient. They will turn around. I want you to look at that picture, because that picture was taken, late fall and winter. I abuse my cows. I feed them some little protein, but they got to eat that dry grass. That's my thought. I'm not going to carry hay to them. Our native grasslands are resilient to about 3 or 4 stresses. One of them is drought. We mentioned that. Drought is a stress. They are resilient to that, but they can't do it all on their own. Another one is grazing. Heavy grazing is a stress. Fire, in a sense, stresses the system, and the other one would be trampling, hoof action, heavy trampling. You can concentrate. We saw some of that this spring when we got those, in May, when we got those heavy rains and the winds were with it, and the cattle would bunch up in one corner or one end of the pasture. It got trampled pretty hard. If we go back next year and look at those, we'll have a hard time finding those, unless it happens year after year after year. So, they are resilient. They will come back. I'm going to tell you a little story. And since this is a ladies' group, this fits really well. Years ago, I was asked to go to look at a pasture with a couple of ladies who had inherited from their father. And the previous tenant had left cattle in there year-round for years and years and years. Matter of fact, he left some of those bull calves until they were 3 or 4-year-old bull calves. But anyway, that's kind of the way he operated. But anyway, we went to look at it, and they were, it was in pretty sorry shape. We were there like, 1st of November. Grazing season was done. Growing season was done. There were hedge trees scattered around. Their fences were falling down. They had an abandoned well that needed to be plugged. And they were inclined just to let this rest. I said, let's get this. Well, the other part of it is I had to actually get down on my hands and knees. I could find the big blue stem plants with a rosette of leaves, about 5 or 6 leaves, hookered down right down to the ground, about that big around. The big blue stem was still there. The other species were too, but big blue stem was still our key species. I said, well, let's lighten the load here, and let's give it some late season rest. Well, how do we do that? I said, well, there's a fella down the road here that does quite a bit of that kind of. So we got them introduced. In 2 years, we went back each fall. The heads on the big blue stem were as high as the hood on the pickup. They are resilient. They will come back as long as there's a couple of things they can't recover from. That's, well, I won't say they can't, but they don't in a man's life. The plow and pavement. Those are 2 of the hardest things there is when it comes to prairie. Okay. Give me a break. Give me a break. I'm a real big believer in rest, and that's what we did with these ladies. We gave them rest. Rest during the growing season. Rest during the growing season. Coming out of a drought or a situation where it's been overgrazed or whatever the situation might be, rest is the key. Rest is key. If you look back at pre-European settlement, our pastures here, or our prairies here were rested late in the season a lot of time because the buffalo herds moved on in big numbers. They may have used it hard early in the season, but they moved on. So rest is really, really, really important in grazing. I like this picture. This is one of our pastures, and we've got good grass right down to the edge of the water. You see a lot of ponds that are just beat to death around the edge. I'd rather it looks like this. I'd rather it looks, and rest is the thing, doesn't it? I will, this is another deal, and it was dry during that time, but to give you an example about rotations, my thought about rotations, I see some really good rotations with 10, 20 paddocks, and those are nice. They take a lot of time. I've never been tied to my home base long enough, working both NRCS and Rural Center, and even now chasing after grandkids. I can't be there every day to look after that. So it's a simple rotation. It may not be quite as good as a real complex one, but you still get the kind of rest that gave us that grass right now. 4 pastures. That's basically what I use, 4 pastures. I start out the season with a week of grazing for each one. Then I extend it to 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. But you see, first of all, we're getting 3 weeks of rest. Then we're getting 30 days of rest. And then as the season goes on, it extends it. So rest periods are real, real important. And everybody's situation is different. Even if you only had 2 pastures, say you got a cow-calf deal and you got 2 pastures and they're a mile down the road, can you make that into rotation? Sure. I mean, in that case, the simplest rotation you could do would be, okay, this year we're going to graze the south pasture until June 25th. We're going to move to the north pasture. Next year, we're starting the north pasture, we're going to move it back. So each year, every 2 years, each pasture gets some rest somewhere in there. You know, I'm not telling you how to do each of you have different situations, but the thought process, how can you help that to recover like that? This fellow had I was there that day to work with him on a clean water farms deal, and it was time to rotate. He said, I'm going to rotate them this afternoon. They were standing there at the gate. I said, let's do it. I mean, why wait for them? Let's do it. Why wait until the afternoon? It was time to do it. And so you can move across the road. You can move up and down the road. Our little system, we go 1.5 miles up and down the road. It's not hard. Matter of fact, sometimes it's kind of fun. My next little thing that I think the pastures tell us is that nature abhors a vacuum. The grass is actually buffalo grass, and the green stuff is broomweed. Is that what we should find in the tall grass prairie? Boy, there's a pretty strong visual message there to me. This is years and years and years. I'm not sure what it would take for this one to recover, but it doesn't matter what it. You know, when we abuse the system and we take away that very diverse native mixture of plants that are out there and create openings and bare ground, there will be plants that will come in. We may not like them, but they're going to come in there. They're going to come in. Excuse me. Undesirable species will come in. And so my thought on that is, you know, when you go to the pasture, go with the idea in mind that you're going to do more than count cattle and take them in, or sheep or goats or whatever it is you got. You need to be looking for other things. And so when it comes to these problem species, you know, be they undesirable ones that might increase with heavy grazing, even though they're native, or invaders that don't belong there. And you know, I live in Greenwood County. We're one of the worst counties in the state with Serratia lespedeza, and I have that problem. I can tell you that now. But scout often, you know, be able to identify those invaders, spot treat early before it gets so thick. You have to do something big, and then if necessary, change your grazing program and go to the technical people for help. Alex would be glad to come, or whoever's in your county. There's always people there that can help you. Now, what about when you get in a situation where, you know, somebody like me is silly enough to buy a pasture that's got way more serratia than you could do with spot treatment? I don't like to do complete applications of herbicides. I don't like that. But in some cases you have to in order to get a handle on that. But if you can spot treat, and when you're going around spot treating, you're going to see a lot of what's out in that pasture. You're riding a four-wheeler out through there, whatever it is, spraying these kind of things, you find. One of my pet peeves are trees that grow up in a fence. I mean, I see that all the time. I tell people there's one thing worse than having a tree growing up in your fence, and that's 2 or more. My wife and I just got done with a fencing project that, I'm kidding you not here now. There were 3 places where mulberry trees had grown up around the T-posts. That's a real problem, folks. I figured out a way to handle that, but I mean, why let that happen? I carry limb loppers with me and a bottle of Tordon RTU. You don't need the Tordon for little cedars like we see coming up here in the corner and over there, but I see that all the time. Mulberry trees get carried around a lot. Honey locust trees, one of the worst. Hedge trees, pretty bad too, but all of them. I mean, they're easy to get when they're small. They're easy to get when they're small. Okay. Let's not get in a rut. Well, we do things because they've always been done that way. The box over there under the trees at the left is a mineral feeder. The water runs from left to right. What's the problem here? Somebody has told us that we need to put that mineral close to shade and water. Wait a minute. I mean, wait a minute. There's got to be some bare, there's all kinds of bare ground there. I mean, you know, your cattle, you don't want your cattle drinking water out of a deal like that if there's some other alternative. Put that mineral on a part of a pasture where the cattle don't graze as hard and get it out of there. And I would probably take those trees out there. Talking about those invaders, and I'd probably better throw this in since we're talking about trees, but hedge trees, which are common in this part of the world, they're male trees and female trees. If you want to leave some male trees up on the hill away from the stream. Okay? They need shade, put them up on the hill away from the stream. And the way you know which trees are male and female this time of the year, and it's concerned me because I saw one of my